My sister banned my girlfriend from staying in my room. Because she's a bad influence on her kids, so I banned her kids from our family vacation to Canada. Now she shows up at my door with packed bags on the day we're leaving. This isn't a rant or an angry post. Rather, it's something funny and karmic. Before talking about the current situation, let me tell you how we got here. 4 years ago, the sewage pipes in my sister's apartment got clogged, which required plumbing work. A pipe burst, and her unit was flooded, needing maintenance for a week. The apartment owner asked them to move out temporarily. Her husband, and their 3 kids who were 3, 5, and 7 years old at the time. They desperately looked for a place to stay during that week. She called our parents to ask for help, but they were out of town. She asked if they had left a spare key with someone or somewhere she could access. My mother said no, that they had the key with them. The only option she had left was me. Her in-laws live in another city, and they didn't have enough money to pay for a hotel for a week, although there were other reasons too, which I'll talk about later. I wasn't excited about the idea. My sister's family is known for being chaotic. Her children are noisy, messy, and worst of all, spoiled. She and her husband have their own problems, which they don't exactly hide from the world. But I felt guilty thinking that if I didn't let them in, they'd probably have to spend the week in a makeshift attic with a tent. I couldn't be so cruel as to expose them to the cold, so I reluctantly agreed. The nightmare began the moment they entered my apartment. I knew it would be difficult, but I didn't imagine it would be so toxic. Within minutes, my quiet apartment was turned upside down. The problem is that the kids have lived their entire lives in a small, one-bedroom apartment. They don't even have a room to themselves. The apartment has a storage area that they converted into a tiny children's room with bunk beds. So when the kids found out they were going to stay here for a week, they were fascinated. It's not that I have a very luxurious place, but my 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony seemed like a luxury to them. The kids were excited just to see the refrigerator full of snacks and juices. It's not that they're starving, but they're overly spoiled. They want to devour all the food, so there's nothing left for others. I'm not proud to say this, but my sister did a terrible job raising them. To save energy, she allows them everything: screen time, junk food, everything. This is one of the reasons they couldn't stay in a hotel. More than the cost of accommodation, they would have been charged for property damage. The problem is that my sister doesn't care how her kids are growing up. She's busy in her own world. As soon as she came in, she dropped her bags by the door and threw herself on the couch, looking at her phone as if she were checking into a hotel with childcare included. Her husband arrived a minute later, already looking tired and annoyed from having driven here. He sat as far away from her as possible with a disgusted look on his face. I left them to their own devices and went to my room, but when I came back after a while, the kids had wrecked my place like a tornado. They had raided the refrigerator, were shouting and fighting over the TV remote, and left traces of snacks all over the house. My brother-in-law was sweating trying to control them, but I guess it's too late to discipline them now. Within hours, I knew this would be unbearable. My sister seemed oblivious to the mess her kids were causing. After a while, her husband also seemed indifferent to everything, and I ended up cleaning up after them like a reluctant babysitter. After hours of scrolling on her phone, when she finally looked up and saw that I had given them my other room, she exploded. I had an extra room where my work area was. I moved to my bedroom and prepared the extra room with mattresses and pillows so they would be comfortable. That was all I could do. I don't have a guest bed. She expected me to give them my bedroom and that I would take the other room. Why would I do that? She told me I could sleep on the mattress while they used my bed. I responded, "The 5 of you don't even fit in the bed." She said, "Then take your brother-in-law with you to the mattress. My kids and I will stay with the bed." I said, "No way. I'm not leaving my room, especially not for them to wreck it." Then she suggested I take the kids with me to my bed. I lost my patience and said, "Listen, the extra room with the mattress is all I have. Take it or leave it. You can go pay for a hotel with all the amenities you want so you don't have to argue with me." She bit her tongue, went into the room, and slammed the door. I wish my girlfriend had been in town so I could go to her house. The nights were a completely new level of discomfort. My sister had a troubled marriage, to say the least, and they made no effort to hide it, not even in front of their kids or me. Every night, like clockwork, my sister and her husband had shouting matches. They yelled at each other about everything from money problems to accusations of infidelity. I would prefer not to have heard some things, but my sister and her husband have megaphone-like mouths. Even the lady upstairs must have heard it. Believe me, you don't want to hear your sister telling her husband he can go sleep at his little girlfriend's place. One night, while I was trying to relax and read a book, I heard them arguing in the living room. My sister was saying that she had to sleep on the floor because of him, and that if he had enough savings, they could have stayed in a hotel. Her husband replied, "We couldn't afford it because you spend money like it grows on trees. Who do you think pays your credit card bills every month?" She scoffed, "Please, you barely make enough to keep the lights on. Maybe if you worked harder we wouldn't be in this mess, but as always, you thought someone would bail us out." This continued for hours. I went to the kitchen to get something from the refrigerator, thinking maybe I would interrupt them, and they would stop. Not at all. Their voices became louder and more toxic. It seemed like having an audience made them feel better, and they tried harder to put on a good show. The kids were sitting quietly in a corner, pretending to watch TV, but clearly uncomfortable and upset. I felt bad for them. I wanted to intervene and tell them to stop, but I didn't feel it was my place. It wasn't my marriage to fix. My only idea was to start clapping. Maybe then the show would end, and they would stop. But I went back to my room to sleep. I thought it was just a matter of a few days, so I endured it. But they crossed all boundaries on the third day when my girlfriend came to visit me. She had returned to the city and brought takeout food. We planned to spend the afternoon watching a movie. My sister and the kids were out for a walk, so we sat on the living room couch. We were watching something on TV while eating when my sister and her kids returned. Sorry, my sister and her undisciplined little minions returned. Obviously, the kids wanted me to share my food, which I gladly did. My sister, on the other hand, barely acknowledged my girlfriend even when I introduced her, and my girlfriend politely greeted her. My sister just nodded with a cold hello and a fake smile, then went to her room. We let it go and continued with the movie. The kids were around. The youngest was playing while the other two insisted on watching some Harry Potter movies, so we put them on for them. My girlfriend was chatting with the kids, and it was kind of fun. I don't really think they're minions, but my sister has raised them, or hasn't, to seem like it. After a while, my sister came out of her room and looked at us with disgust on her face and a look that something was very wrong. She came over and asked, "Is this really appropriate with the kids here?" We looked up and asked, "What do you mean by that?" She whispered, "This, sitting so close, being so attached. It's not something the children should see." I stared at her, stunned. We were literally sitting watching a movie. What was inappropriate about that? She said, "The kids know she's not part of our family, and it's not good for them to see their uncle cuddling with some random girl. If the kids ask, who is that woman, and why was she sitting so close to uncle and drinking from his glass? What am I going to tell them?" My first thought was, this woman is crazy, the kind you need to call an exorcist for. I responded, "Tell them the truth, that she's my girlfriend and not some random girl." My girlfriend felt uncomfortable and suggested we go inside since the kids were watching our argument, and it wasn't good for them. At this point, she didn't know that the kids were used to seeing their parents fight every day. That's when the sarcasm immediately came out of me. "Oh, so you and your husband can have a fight in front of the kids every day, but I can't sit on the couch with my girlfriend because that might damage them. Is that your absurd logic?" My sister got nervous, gritted her teeth and muttered, "That's completely different. We're married. You're not." It was useless to reason with her, so I just went to my room and slammed the door. I struggled to understand that she and her husband were fine yelling and cursing in front of the kids. And yet they had the nerve to lecture me about setting a bad example by simply sitting next to my girlfriend on the couch. I was in a very, very bad mood. My girlfriend decided to stay overnight. A few hours later, there was a knock on my bedroom door and my sister's voice on the other side. "Can I come in for a second?" I responded with an annoyed look. She whispered, but she wasn't going to leave. "Isn't it late?" I frowned and asked, "Why do you care?" My God. She crossed her arms, raised her eyebrows, and said, "My kids are asking why that girl is sleeping in Uncle's bed if they're not married." I responded, "It's none of your business or your kids' business. Go find a real problem to feel bad about." To this she yelled, "For God's sake, it is my business. We're trying to raise our children with good manners. Please don't expose them to acts they're not in a position to understand. What kind of example are you setting? This should be an apartment with good values, yet it seems like a sleazy motel," I yelled back. "I hope you know this is my apartment, so deal with it or leave." At this, my girlfriend got up and said she was leaving. I tried to stop her, but she sighed and said she was tired and frustrated with the drama. I said, "I'm leaving too." I grabbed my stuff, laptop, phone, etc. And as I left, I told my sister, "They shouldn't look at my things since they might not be appropriate for your kids, right? Or do you have a problem with that too?" As I was leaving, I locked my bedroom door so they couldn't access it. I spent the remaining days of the week at my girlfriend's house, counting the days until they left. I was in contact with my brother-in-law, asking about the status of their apartment. I was afraid their stay would be extended, but fortunately, he confirmed they would leave as planned. The day they were supposed to leave, I returned. It was so satisfying to see them packing. When they finally left, I swore I would never let my sister get close to me or my girlfriend again. Fast forward to this week. My parents invited my girlfriend and me for Thanksgiving. My sister and her family were also invited, and as always, they took control of the space with their noise and chaos. During dinner, my girlfriend and I casually mentioned our upcoming vacation plans. We were going to take a trip to Canada with my girlfriend's teenage nieces, aged 13 and 15. As soon as I finished saying it, my sister chimed in, "That sounds amazing. You should take my kids too." Her kids are now 7, 9, and 11 years old. I almost choked on my drink. I nodded and said, "No way, that's not going to happen." She continued pleading until I firmly responded, "No, that's not going to happen." She was offended and asked, "Why not? You're already taking 2 kids. What's a few more?" My girlfriend, as calm as ever, explained, "We've already made plans with my nieces. It's not a group trip for a bunch of kids. It's something special for them." But my sister wouldn't accept it. She insisted, "That's so unfair. My kids would love a trip abroad. They've never been anywhere nice on vacation. They've never left the country." She looked at my brother-in-law, bit her tongue, and continued, "Because their father is poor and can't take us on a nice vacation." It was so embarrassing. My brother-in-law got up from the table and went outside. I gritted my teeth and said, "Maybe if you worked more and earned money instead of fighting over it and blaming your husband, you could take your kids yourself." Her face turned red. Maybe it was the first time someone confronted her about her toxicity toward her husband. She angrily responded, "How dare you? You have no right to comment on my personal matters. If you're so concerned about me, then let my kids have a vacation in Canada with you." Then she started crying, saying I was mocking her marriage and belittling them because they earned less money. I didn't feel like putting up with her nonsense, so I didn't say anything because I didn't want to keep arguing with her. Everyone at the table was silent for a moment until my girlfriend told my sister, "But how can you feel comfortable sending your kids with us?" She wiggled her ring finger and said, "We're still not married. They're not going to witness things they shouldn't." I burst into laughter. I didn't expect that response, but it was so on point. My sister glared at her furiously and said, "You're unbelievable. You're really ruining my kids' Thanksgiving just to prove a point." She stormed off crying, but I didn't care. After she left, my parents and we laughed a lot about the whole thing. My sister has always been dramatic, and we all know it, so nobody takes her seriously. By the way, my mom revealed that the key was under the flower pot when they were out of town, but she couldn't risk letting my sister and her kids be alone in the house, so she lied about it. I jokingly got angry with my mom for making me deal with the problem. It was very funny. I wanted to share this with my community for a good laugh. Edit to add, okay, I received some comments saying I was insensitive to the kids. Seriously? After reading all this, that's what you understood. Update 1. I can't believe I have to write an update. It didn't even occur to me that the drama would continue after my sister stormed away from the table during dinner. I thought that was the end of the matter. But that would have been too good. The day we were supposed to leave for vacation, someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find my sister and her 3 kids, all dressed for travel with their suitcases in hand. Before I could react, she and the kids excitedly shouted, "We're ready for Canada!" She said it as if I had agreed to take them. I yelled, not in excitement but in anger, "No, no, you're not!" I didn't care that I was yelling in front of her kids. She asked the kids to come in while she discussed vacation protocol with Uncle. The oldest was already upset because he didn't want to go with 2 girls his age, my girlfriend's nieces. He said he didn't want to go, but my sister gave him a furious look, and they came in. Then she whispered, "I'm not going, just the kids." I replied, "None of you are going, so take them and leave." She stated, "Do you want to ruin my kids' vacation? They're so excited about the trip to Canada, and you want to ruin it?" I replied, "Who asked them to get excited? I don't remember it being me, and if it wasn't me, then I don't care." She raised her voice and said, "How can you be so cruel to your own nephews and niece? If she can take her nieces, why can't you take yours?" I was so fed up with her. I said, "You know what? I don't owe you any explanation. The trip is planned with my girlfriend and her nieces, and I'm not making changes for you." She took a deep breath and sighed. Look at their faces. Look how excited they are. They've been talking about this all week. No, you can't just disappoint them now. The kids looked at me with big, hopeful eyes, but I wasn't going to fall for that. I stood there, indifferent. My girlfriend came out of the bedroom and saw the kids on the couch, ready for the trip. She was surprised and asked me what was going on. When I told her, unlike me, she didn't get upset but calmly told my sister, "You had no right to tell your kids they were coming with us. That's manipulative and unfair. We will not be taking them with us, so please, it's time for you to leave so we can get ready." My sister became furious and replied, "You don't have kids, so you don't understand. You can't just say no when they're so excited. You know how hard it is to make them happy." I angrily responded, "That's not my responsibility. That's your only job since you don't do anything else but complain." At that point, she took out her phone and called my mom, putting her on speakerphone. She said, "Mom, can you believe this? They refused to take my kids after promising them a trip." My mom probably sighed and responded, "You can't force them, honey. If they said no, you need to respect that. It's not fair to your kids or to them." She still insisted, "Your son is doing sinful things, so at least ask him to take my kids. That will clean some of his sins." Mom said she didn't want to get involved in this and hung up. My sister's face turned red, but she wouldn't give up. She said, "Fine, I'll leave them here. You can't just abandon them. You won't have any other choice but to take them." And she started to leave. I shouted, "Do you really think that will work? If you leave them here, we'll call the police for child abandonment. I'm not joking." Her jaw dropped. She stopped and said, "You wouldn't dare." I coldly replied, "Try me." At that moment, her oldest son walked out and yelled at his mother, "Let's go! If he doesn't want to take us, why are you forcing him? I don't want to go either." The other 2 followed, complaining that they wanted to go to Canada. My sister looked at her oldest son like a viper, but he didn't care. He walked out with his backpack. My sister took the other 2 and pushed them to follow their brother. In the hallway, she called her husband, screaming, "He rejected the kids. This is your fault. If you earned more money, we wouldn't have to beg him for vacations." She was on speakerphone, and I could hear him respond, "And if your lazy ass got some money too, they could have their own vacation." She was already out of sight, but I could still hear her faint voice as she went down the stairs. A few hours later, while driving, I received an unexpected call from my brother-in-law. We weren't exactly close, but we had always been cordial with each other, so I hesitantly answered. He told me he wanted to apologize for what had happened. That surprised me. I replied, "It's okay. After all, it was my sister's fault, not yours. Unlike her, I can't blame you for earning less money." He informed me that my sister had told him I had agreed to take the kids over the phone, which is why he allowed them to come to my house. He didn't know the truth until she came home, ranting about how I had threatened to call the police. His son told him the whole story. I responded directly, "Well, that's your wife for you." He laughed bitterly. "Tell me about it." Look, I'm not trying to defend her, but things have been tough. Money is tight, the kids are growing and are harder to handle, and she is, well, you know how she is. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed silent. He continued, "I guess what I'm trying to say is, thank you for standing firm. Someone had to do it. I've tried, but you've seen how that goes." That impacted me more than I expected. He was suffering, and it seemed like my sister had been crushing him for years. I felt sorry for him. That day, after vacation, when I went to visit my parents, I found out that my sister had lied to everyone, saying I backed out after promising to take the kids on vacation. The only thing she didn't lie about was that I had threatened to call the police. As soon as I saw her, I told my mom about my brother-in-law's call, and she felt sorry for him too. I wish he could free himself from that situation. I guess he's hanging in there just for the kids, or maybe for economic reasons. I don't know, but clearly their marriage is broken. I know, it's something obvious to say. Update 2. During our trip, some things have happened, but not in Canada. Here. I haven't been able to catch up on everything until we got back. I can answer some comments now about things many people suggested or asked in my previous posts, but that I had no way of answering before. A main topic is that some thought my brother-in-law had been unfaithful, and that's why my sister was the way she was. To begin with, my sister has always been a bit touched in the head. Not to this extent. That's something that has been getting worse over time. But she was always unreasonable. And no, my brother-in-law wasn't unfaithful. It was just my sister talking out of jealousy. She didn't like my brother-in-law's female co-workers, so she called them little girlfriends, as if something was going on with them. I know what I'm going to say isn't the most impressive phrase in the world, but my sister is pretty crazy. A craziness that has reached certain limits, at least the limits of my brother-in-law, which led him to file for divorce. Maybe his last call with me gave him the courage to do it, or he really reached a point where he said, "This is it." My sister still wanted my nephews to have a vacation, so she thought going to my parents' vacation house was a good idea. They don't usually go because it's a bit far, and they don't have extra money for gas, but according to my sister, it was the least they could do for them after what I did. So she called my father to ask for it, and my father said no. He didn't even let her finish the speech she had prepared to convince him to lend them the house for a few days. He simply said, "Absolutely not." And that was it. But that was it for my father because my sister never accepts no as an answer. So she made the trip there. She thought she would find a spare key since she discovered what Mom told me. But she thought wrong. What did she do next? She called my father. She wanted to know where the key was, and my father told her there was no key. As far as I know, he was telling the truth. But if not, I can't blame him either. The next thing was to ask him for gas money. My sister had had the excellent plan of traveling there with the little she had, and after a few days, she would figure out how to get the money. She would probably call my brother-in-law or find another solution. She also hoped there would be food in the house, but according to my father, they don't usually leave canned food there. All of this was happening probably while I was talking to my brother-in-law. So while we were traveling to Canada is when everything exploded. My brother-in-law wasn't aware, and she was going to call him once they were settled in. But in the end, she ended up calling him to send her money for gas. My brother-in-law had to do it because their kids were there, and it was already night. If she had traveled alone, maybe he would have turned off his phone. Finally, I'm sure they had an argument, although I don't know this for certain. I can sense it. This finally led my brother-in-law to decide to file for divorce. 2 days after we returned from our trip, my sister received the divorce papers. There's a dilemma here. If there's a somewhat responsible parent, it's my brother-in-law. At least he's the one who works between the two, but he's not going to get full custody of his kids. Still, my girlfriend and I think the fact that the two of them are separated can alleviate much of the toxicity that the kids suffer daily. That can only be known with the passage of years. This will definitely be my last update. I came here intending to post only once and ended up making 2 more updates. I might answer some comments, but that's it from me. Comment: yes, the divorce is finalized, and they have obtained shared custody.